I'm in the right room so far. I don't know the other guys are working out here. So you guys are young and energetic and focused. I like to see the smiles on your faces. Okay, well, I like to see a smile on your face because everybody else is like, really? Smiling?
Wave.
I tell you, your view of the future is incredibly important for the country. So your view of the future is empowering for the present. As a kid growing up in North Charleston, ain't y'all been to Charleston, South Carolina? Did y'all like the beach? Pretty cool. Did y'all go to Folly Beach or Isle of Palms? You're real Americans. I like that. Okay. So, and take that off the tape, by the way, because I love my brothers on Isle of Palms as well, since I have the privilege of representing them too. But growing up in North Charleston, I was in a single-parent household, just growing up in poverty, not a lot of opportunities that I could see in my future. And so my view of the future really shaped my approach to the present. And so as a high school kid, I was flunking out of high school. Didn't have a chance to go to college from my perspective. So why bother to participate in making the country a better place? And so as a freshman in high school, I flunked out. I failed world geography, civics, Spanish, and English. Now when you fail Spanish and English, they don't call you bilingual, okay? They called me by ignorant, because I couldn't speak English. And that's where I found my happy self. But I had as a sophomore, I had a mentor come along, a guy who ran the Chick-fil-A. He's a Chick-fil-A operator, a guy named John Moniz. And John taught me some very valuable lessons to make me a better citizen for our country. He said having a job is a good thing, but creating jobs is a much better thing. Okay? That makes sense. He says, having an income, good. Making a profit, even better. And John started teaching me the basic principles of being an entrepreneur. And he taught me that you didn't have to be an entertainer, you didn't have to be an athlete, that you could actually think your way out of poverty. And when I look at where we are as a country today, his message rings true today like it hasn't in a very long time. The fact of the matter is the future of this nation depends on people who have is that your view of that future will dictate how much you invest your life into what we become. And I think we have a great future. I look at candidates like Mr. Hudson. You can tell this man is going to be a great congressman. Number one, he's articulate. Number two, he understands how to get things started the Republicans here on this campus. And he marries well. You got to give him credit for that. The best part of him is sitting to his left, by the way, which is an odd conversation to have on your left. That's good. That's really good. You guys will get my jokes later. I'm from the red part of the Carolinas. I understand that the translation from Charleston to Charlotte, the translation is a little slower, but it does come. So just be patient with me. I'll get to you. I think when you look at the country, you have to say we need strong leadership. And how many of y'all would agree that President Obama has not been a strong leader? Hallelujah! It's like a revival in the land. Okay. How many of y'all would agree that his economic policies have been a complete dismal failure? You're not sure?
No.
You're not sure? Well, let me are you okay? Okay, good. Woo. I thought I was going to have to explain to him. I know there's a Democrat plant somewhere in here, so I found out who he is. So he's like, that's wrong. That's wrong. This guy behind you? He's like, I won't even say why he pointed at you. I'm just joking. Because he has hair and I don't. What do you guys think? Oh my goodness gracious. You gotta have some fun, right? He's like, that guy. We didn't know who's behind him. So now that guy's like this way. Oh my God. Yeah, probably good answer. No, you can't actually. Stay right there. I'll come to you next. So when you think about this, think about the frame that we're working within. Think about the fact that this president, how old is our country? Okay, 236 years or so, right? So think about it, 232 years of history. We have about $10.7 trillion of debt. 232 years. 233 to 236, last 4 years, our debt climbs by $5 trillion. Or said differently, in 4 years of our a third of the debt. or $5 trillion. What do we get? Do we get 5% unemployment? Please raise your hand if you were live in a place where there's 5% unemployment. 6% unemployment? 7% unemployment? Where do you live?
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. What's your name?
John.
John. Good to meet you, John.
Nice to meet you.
God bless you. And he's a Chick-fil-A guy. Let's give him a hand. Just one, not two. Thank you very much. Anyway, so John, who do you think should be the next president of the United States?
My governor, Mitt Romney.
I rest my case, you see. When Mitt Romney left office, it was 4.6%, 4.7% unemployment.
4.2, actually.
4.2. I heard 4.17 this morning, and I heard 4.7, so it's actually 4.17, which means 4.2, right?
There you go.
And when he came into office, it was 5.6, 5.7.
Yeah.
So he moved from 50th to 30th. That's the kind of job creator we need as an executive. But, someone would say, well, what about the private sector? So Mitt Romney worked really hard to make the world a better place in Massachusetts. Well, how many of y'all appreciate the private sector experience of the man in the White House today? Okay, Snickers are good. That's a good sign. That means that what private sector experience? Now, for the last 14 years of my life, I've run insurance agencies, owned the good hands. Not the company, just an agency. If I owned the company, we'd have a different conversation about the size of my check that I'm writing to you next time. But since I don't own it, you have to do with what I wrote to you last time. So, Allstate, I had several agencies, I had 2 agencies, and a third one for a little while, and then we consolidated them. Well, my private sector experience tells me that business owners don't create jobs to be nice people. They create jobs to make a profit. And then from that profit, they're able to do nice things for the world. But without the profit, you can't do nice things for the world. So, President Obama, who may be a genuinely nice guy, somebody that you would, are you over the age of 21? For those shaking your head, someone you might want to have a beer with. The rest of you guys, sorry, just have a Coke. I like that concept. See, these 2 guys right here are right where I am. I went to the White House and I asked them for some help with our Boeing plant in North Charleston, South Carolina, the big NLRB fight that we had, the nation watched. And he says, I just can't get involved in that. And then a few months later, he comes out against my legislation, 2587, which sought to take away some of the remedies from the NLRB to fight states like South Carolina that created jobs. My friends on the left said, because of the efforts of Boeing, we're shipping jobs overseas. My answer was, I didn't know that South Carolina left a union. I know we tried a long time ago, but we're still in the union. You know, when did we become overseas? It's that paradigm that has to be shifted back to reality, where this nation creates jobs at home. And a part of the economic picture that helps that happen is to have someone who's been in business and created jobs here in America. You think about success stories, and we all know the stories. We've watched the stories, we've read the paper, so we understand Staples is a part of the genius of Bain. We look at Domino's, the largest distribution of pizza in the country, part of the genius of Bain. So the success that we experience as a nation doesn't come from some factory in Washington, D.C. known as the Capitol. It comes from entrepreneurs, innovators, people like yourselves who have great ideas. And what you really need is someone to help harness it, not the government, but your friends, your family. And hopefully one day when we get the regulatory environment right, a bank might be willing to invest in your vision, your dream, your opportunities. And if we do that, America will have a better day. But you've got to have someone in the White House who understands the notion of taking a risk. You've got to have someone who understands winning and losing, not just people who live in the mediocre middle. It doesn't work for Americans. We want the thrill of victory, which means that we have to be exposed to the agony of defeat. I will tell you that I think November 6th will be the day we celebrate. Celebrate North Carolina's return to the right side of the column. I think because of your activities, that North Carolina will become another red state. And I am encouraging you to get involved in campaigns like Richard Hudson. I'm encouraging you to not only knock on doors or make phone calls or put signs out or write emails to your friends or use social media in a way that makes all of us old Republicans very proud. I'm asking you to go the extra mile and bring your friends along with you. Encourage folks to get involved in this campaign. And as you succeed in this district, we succeed across North Carolina. And as we succeed across North Carolina, we pick up victories in places like Florida. We squeak one out in Virginia. We win by double digits here. We get really a solid response from our friends in Ohio. And we get a good response from our friends in Pennsylvania. And we end up with a new president. And his name is Mitt Romney. And with that, I believe that our nation is heading for the best of times. I've said it several times. I said it at the Republican Convention when I spoke there for my 120 seconds of fame. 2 long minutes of fame. I said the greatest opportunity for America, the greatest hope for America is to change the resident of the White House. And with that I end, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. You don't have to stand up. I appreciate it, though. You just talk to the rest of these guys there. Any questions? Hey, they jump all over me. Really? Come up here and ask some of those great questions.
Tell us about the budget fight. Can we really cut spending? What's it going to take to get it done?
It's a great question. We can cut spending. I'll tell you what, if you think about the budget we have, you have 2 challenges here, okay? Anybody in here really good with numbers? The guy with the camera says, I'm kind of good with it, but I have the camera in my hands. I can't really do it right now. Anybody else good with numbers? Okay, I'll pretend to be good with numbers then. Thank y'all for your volunteerism. We're on that later. Okay? So let's say the government spends about $3.8 trillion, right? We bring in about $2.5 trillion. Well, let me ask you a question. Anybody here set their budgets significantly higher than their paychecks? Does that make sense to anybody in here? Doesn't to me either. So here's what happens in Congress, however, and led by the White House. A $3.8 trillion budget. Spending, revenues comes in about $2.5 trillion. So we're deficit spending about 42 cents on the dollar. So we borrow 42 cents from recent college graduates. We hope you get jobs. China. And unborn Americans. Realize that when you're born, you owe about 50 grand to the government. So you take 330 million Americans or so, divide $16 trillion today at 4:02 p.m. on sitting on the Cavuto show, getting ready to go on air, and he announces for the first time. I can't even say how he said that, but he says, "Gentlemen, very sad day for us. $16 trillion worth of debt has just been passed. $16 trillion of debt." So we're not just borrowing from China. We're borrowing it from people who don't even exist yet, from my perspective. And so what do we do with this $2.5 trillion? Well, anybody believe that if you make a promise, you should keep your promises? So we are the greatest generation, as we call them, our entitlement programs, Social Security, right at 600 and some change, $600 billion. Medicare, about $520 billion. Medicaid, roughly $270 or so billion. We have so those are things that we have to pay. So we close in about $2 trillion, $2.5 trillion before we leave the entitlements. Our discretionary spending is over $1 trillion, which includes funding for the military of $600 billion. So before we get out of our entitlements and the military, we're out of money. Anyone think that we have to figure out how to bend the trajectory of how we spend money in this country? Paul Ryan has an answer. Now, I'm a fan of Paul Ryan. I served within Congress. I've had a couple of good conversations with him. This is the guy with the vision and with the genius to implement. Here's a couple of things that I was really taught by Paul Ryan. The challenge that we have in America today is making sure that we bend the trajectory sufficiently so that the next generation has the traction to succeed in America without the burden of the debt that comes with it. And part of the way that we do that is by making sure that we transform our entitlements for those under the age of 55. Under the age of 55. So if you're 55 today, please raise your hand. Yep, young Republicans still. No 55-year-olds here yet. Are you raising your hand, sir? Oh, you were just moving your glasses. I'm sorry. Hang on. I was like, wow. What kind of stuff do you take? Okay. So, woo. 55 and older, this does not affect you. For us who are like in my age group, 25. That ain't that funny. Appreciate that though. 35? You buying 35? Forget about it. Anyway, back to you guys. Sorry about that. I'll step on your other toe in a minute. But here's the thing. How many of y'all believe that you're going to have Social Security? Please raise your hand. I like you. We'll talk about that later. So two out of 40 believe that we're going to have Social Security. The only way for us to have Social Security is for us to change what we expect. We can't have it under the current system. And there's an equation why. The reason why is that when it started, 16 and a half people were working. One was retired, and the one that retired had a life expectancy of about 3.5 years. Now, about 2010, 3 are working, one is retired, the one has a life expectancy of 15 years. Anyone think that the same formula that worked with 16 and a half working, one retired, will work today with 3 working and 1 retired? Just doesn't work. So we have to change the math. But for us to be who we've always been, Americans who honor our words, we have to make sure that the folks that we made that promise to, 55 and up, so close to retirement, they get what they get. They get what they've got coming to them. But Ronald Reagan, the genius that he was, in 1980 said that he was going to change the Social Security retirement age to 67, 28 years into the future. We have the same opportunity to do the same thing today, to change the retirement age for those of us in our age group. I know I'm stretching it pretty far. Those of us in our age group, I'm kind of the guy that believes that if I pass legislation, I should make sure that it affects me too. So I'm willing to live under the consequences of changing legislation that affects me as well. So I would be happy to say that my retirement age is going to be 70 instead of 67, so that we can keep the promises that we've made to the greatest generation. And at the same time, create an incentive for younger folks to either provide for their own retirement or look at a different plan. So if we do that there, if we make some simple changes to Medicare, block grant, and Medicaid, we find ourselves in a very positive position to bend the trajectory in the right direction. It doesn't solve the problems, but it makes the outlay, the future spending, a lot more manageable and predictable. So I think we can get there. Any other questions? I may have asked for one too many questions, by the way.
After the debt ceiling debate, what do you think that going forward the future looks like as far as what is kind of set in motion the months to come?
Yeah, the debt ceiling debate of last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the BCA, August 2011, tough time for the country. We were going to shut the government down if we didn't succeed with some kind of debt deal. So members of Congress voted to support a debt ceiling deal that created a super committee.
Right.
Anybody believe in super committees? No? And neither do I. And neither did I. I voted against it because the writing was on the wall. If you can't do it in a couple of years, you certainly can't do it in a couple of weeks. And so part of the challenge was that they were going to find $1.2 trillion in savings over 10 years. And if they did not, half of the cuts would come out of the military, which only represents about 20% of the budget, but they get 50% of the cuts. And the other half would come out of other discretionary spending. Well, it failed, as we thought it would. And now we're faced with the prospects of trying to absorb about $500 billion worth of cuts to the military, in addition to the $487 billion worth of cuts that the president had already forecast was coming. So we have $1 trillion worth of cuts. So what does that look like for the military, for the citizens, and for the job creation? For the military, it looks like 200,000 men and women no longer in uniform. It's about 60 naval vessels no longer patrolling the seas, creating peace. Looks like shrinking the Air Force training for pilots. And it takes about 80,000 troops off the ground from the Army and 20,000 Marines. In the private sector, takes away 1 million civilian jobs in support of the military. So imagine 1 million fewer jobs on top of the 8% unemployment that has existed for 3.5 years. The picture does not look like peace through strength. So the House, we passed a replacement bill on May the 10th of this year that replaced the sequestration cuts with cuts in other parts of the budget. So without the Senate acting and without the White House engaging, we face January 2013, the beginning of some very difficult times for our men and women in uniform. I got to tell you, I take it personally. My brothers are both in the military. One's an Air Force colonel, and the other one's a command sergeant major in the Army. And I will tell you that when we put those folks in the middle of theater, as we call it, harm's way, I want them having the best equipment, best training, and the best likelihood of coming home. And we are devastating them. Other thoughts or questions?
Talking about another stretch with ages, let's say hypothetically, I'm a college sophomore.
Hypothetically.
Yeah.
Have you been a sophomore for more than 3 years?
And this is real life. But college sophomore, 4 years ago, I wasn't paying attention to politics that much. All I know is that some of my buddies who are a little bit older came out of college. They can't necessarily find jobs right now, so I'm not sure all the numbers we've been talking about what that means, but what does this election provide for me, knowing that in a couple of years I'm going to get out of college? And so what are the two, if Obama gets reelected versus President Romney, what does that look like for me when I'm coming out of college?
I think it's a great question. Thank you for framing the question so very well. I would tell you that President Obama sells to the college student that suppressing the real-world interest rate on your loans so as to help it remain affordable is a positive thing. What he forgets to tell you is that having a job to pay the loans back is a better thing. So we're going to have a conversation about lowering the interest rate from 8% to 3%. Well, not necessarily unimportant, but how many of y'all would vote for a job versus lower interest rates? I mean, it's a simple equation. Not that you can't do both, but what our president has delivered to us has been 3.5 years of unemployment for over 8%. So what should we think about the future? Well, the future economy, I think, is driven by a couple things. And one is technology and the other is energy. The reason why the Romney plan has 12 million jobs by 2020, I believe the number is because he focuses on breaking us out of the challenges that we face from an energy perspective. Becoming energy independent by 2020 on the North America helps us create millions of jobs. Whereas the president won't sign a lease for us to drill for more energy. He says he's for it, but he hasn't signed the opportunity to go forward. So what I think you'd find is more government, which requires more spending, which requires more borrowing, which creates more uncertainty, which alleviates the concept of predictability. And all of that coming together means fewer opportunities for young people, because in the marketplace, experience right now has been trumping energy and enthusiasm. So that means that coming out of college, the opportunities are fewer, not greater. Under the Romney plan, you get 12 million new jobs. We get to break open, wide open, the whole notion of technology, and we see the energy economy grow substantially. Those two areas, I think, will lead the way for us from an economic recovery and an economic revival, I dare say. Huge opportunities in those two fields. And America leads the world on energy reserves if you add together gas, coal, and oil. Yes, sir?
With a lot of these campaign ads that we've been seeing in North Carolina about Obama's plan to give back to the middle class and strengthen the middle class, it almost seems like he's making it sound like a bad thing to be a successful businessman, to pull yourself up from your bootstraps, to create wealth for yourself, establish a future for your children, to the point where it makes it look like if you become successful, which growing up all your life, you're told, go to college, get a good job, do everything that I have been raised to do, that I'm striving to do. And then once you get there, you're the bad guy. And so I guess I just want to get your personal opinion on, I'm making choices every day to try to better and further my career.
Absolutely.
So how much of every dollar that I make should I get to keep, or should the guy who didn't go find a job, who just sits around all day collecting my money, keep?
It's a good question. I think what you just outlined, there's a line of delineation between the two sides. One side would be the greed and envy, and the other side would be admiration and hope. Greed and envy. So greed and envy says, I must cut this pie in smaller pieces, because in the world today, there's no more eggs, there's no more milk, there's no more. For me to make the world a more fair place in America, I must divide this. And one of the ways that I get the encouragement to divide this in smaller pieces is to sell to the American people that this guy who owns this pie eats too much. So if I can just give him eat a little less, you can eat a little bit more. Which is absolutely contrary to the whole notion of capitalism and free markets, which simply says that we can actually grow, theoretically, the pie. And this is admiration. This is attraction. This is a place where I was living in the poorest of areas in North Charleston. North Charleston is a poor area in the Charleston County community, the poorest area of Charleston County. So I was living in the poorest area of the poorest city in the entire county, 16 cities. And my mentor comes along and says, dude, you can think your way out of poverty. And I'm thinking to myself, you must be smoking something illegal. You know what I'm saying? I know no one here has ever done that, but I'm just saying, you must be smoking something illegal, right? Because there's just no way that a poor kid has any hope in the world of growing out of the situation that you find yourself in. But John Moniz taught me and sold me on the notion that this back in the 1980s, a Lincoln Continental was the car. And he had won it from Chick-fil-A. He lived in a 2-story house, and he had a dog. Now, for you, that may not sound unique and amazing, but for me, it was amazing. I figured if anybody could afford to have a mouth to feed that was extra, you had to be rich. And he had a dog, which was like amazing and remarkable. Seriously. And unfortunately, what President Obama believes is that we've got to just divide those pieces, because we can't grow our economy. So we have to share the 13 trillion GDP that we have now, as opposed to growing at the 20 trillion. I would suggest to you that the success of this nation is based on one man's dream, one woman's inspiration, and people who are inspired. The reason why we have the largest economy in the world, it's not because the government built it or even helped you build it. It's because individuals were inspired. Steve Jobs got inspired in college. You know, he should have stayed and finished. I understand that, but he did a pretty good job. Bill Gates got inspired in college. Hewlett-Packard in the garage built a multi-billion-dollar business later on. It's true that if you have a dream and you're willing to invest your time into it, you get to succeed beyond typically your wildest imagination. So to the question, the second part of your compound question, the more difficult to answer, by the way. Compound question is, well, how much should we give to the government? Well, I would like the biblical principles to work. 10% should be enough. Unfortunately, no one in the world seems to agree with that, except me. So the philosophy that we've adopted in the House would be a 2-tier personal income tax code. 10% code and 25%. And those would be the 2 tiers that you would have instead of the 4 tiers that we have currently. And then we'd have a corporate tax rate of 25%. And so we believe that 25% would be the top rate in your investment into all that happens in the great country of America. And then the 75% you get to keep and do what you need to do on your behalf. Far better than the 39.6 that we're heading towards. Yes, sir.
Bold at the time it was passed and looking back at it now, what are your thoughts on the TARP program?
Now, I tell you, I think all those TARP stimulus, all the economic things that we try to do to help infuse hope into the economy, abysmal failures. Frankly, there's just, you can sell it multiple ways, but at the end of the day, it's still wrong, and we could have done a lot better had we taken a totally different approach. Art Laffer did an article, I think it was published in the Wall Street Journal, that basically said if you had taken half that money, given it to the private sector, unemployment would be down to 2%.
Congressman, I know you got a long drive.
I do indeed. Thank you all so much for allowing me to come in, and I